That was like her line throughout the show. Like, I think it's a good idea. You come in my neighborhood? I think it's a good idea. You come to my house? I think it's a good idea. You coming with us to the party that we're going to? I think it's a good idea. Us playing bridge? I think it's a good idea. And like,
hi everybody. In this episode of Getting Woke with Dr. Chi, I talked to my dear friend Rashida about the film Passing. It's a film that's based on Nella Larson's book. So it's directed by Rebecca Hall, and it stars Tessa Thompson as the character Irene, and Ruth Negga as the character Claire. Irene is a woman who passes on occasion, whereas Claire passes as a white woman and is married to a white man and has children with him. So it's a really interesting discussion. I hope you enjoy it.
hi Rashida, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good. So thanks for coming to my sister session today, in which we're going to talk about the movie Passing. Mm-hmm. So what were your thoughts about the film?
I love the film. Let me just start by saying that. It really opened my eyes about people, probably even from my own family, who could pass. And how life was back in the day, and how some of us were really willing to sacrifice and, change our identities altogether in order to have a better life and, undergo abuse or, knowing that you may be with someone who hates your culture, stuff like that. But, you're just looking at the end goal, having a better life, whatever that looks like for you, or just having the privilege to go into different spaces and be accepted until they find out that you're actually Black. I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it too. I did really like it. I read the book years ago, and maybe I was just in a different space or something, but I just didn't like the book very much. Do you have favorite moments from the show?
So when they went out and, she was dancing and having a good time, and how she was just able to just blend right in, like nothing ever happened, and how comfortable she was, and how much she missed that side of the culture that she clearly was not getting.
It was like all this energy that she'd been like holding inside of her was going to like be released.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially like when she saw her friend, what's her face? Her friend Irene, I guess is her name.
Yes, Irene.
Yeah. So our friend Irene's like, oh my God, my Black friend! Let's do Black things! And Irene's like, what?
Irene didn't want to get found out either. They were both at a white hair restaurant.
And then she's like, oh, come upstairs with me in my hotel. She's like, I don't think that's a good idea.
But she did it.
That was like her line throughout the show. Like, I think it's a good idea. You come in my neighborhood? I think it's a good idea. You come to my house? I think it's a good idea. You coming with us to the party that we're going to? I don't think it's a good idea. Us playing bridge? I don't think it's a good idea. And like, was she wrong though? I mean, no. In the end,
she wasn't wrong.
Do you think that that Irene's husband had a crush on her?
I think he did, but I don't think he cheated on her.
No.
I don't think so. Maybe he had a penchant for light-skinned women. I mean, he was married to one.
I mean, most guys do, right?
Yes. So, that might have been there. And Claire was definitely beautiful and outgoing. And I think Irene was kind of used to being that girl, even though she was definitely more subdued into herself. I think she was just jealous because Claire, put herself out there and was just a lot more, outgoing. I think things came to a head when I think she had gone into her backyard and saw Claire talking to her maid, and they were having a good time talking about stuff. Irene.
Yeah, I was so annoyed for Irene. I feel like I identified a lot with Irene on the show. I was like, I am paying this woman to keep my house, and look at you chitting and chatting with her. Like, this is not what she is here for. She's here to work. And like, you guys can do this on your off time. The reason we're not leaving for South America like we wanted to is because of Claire. I don't think that's the real reason.
Yeah, right.
And you know what? And she was definitely in an alternate reality, right? Like we see that in the scene where they're in the party and Claire is talking to her husband and she sees her talking just to her husband and they're like engrossed in this conversation. She's like, oh, this is so perfect. You know, she can see the circles in her head, the things in her head, the wheels turning in her head. And then another friend shows up and is like, oh, hi, Claire. And like walks in like nothing's. And you suddenly see her like, she's talking with other people too, that there are other people that she's paying attention, that she's not just focused on Irene's man, which is what Irene was paying attention to.
Then she was like self-medicating.
Yeah. And I was like, is that why she's having trouble like understanding reality? Is it like a side effect of the medication?
Irene was depressed. I really don't know what type of medication she was on, but obviously she had some history of mental illness. I don't know if it was some postpartum something. I don't know.
What did you think about the housekeepers? I felt like there was like this subtle discussion of class.
Yes.
That we see through the lens of her interactions with the housekeeper. It almost felt like the housekeeper like did not like her boss.
Probably not. She was
like most.
Well, I mean, Irene was kind of a bitch. She definitely wasn't as cool as Claire, and I think it was interesting that the help was, you know, a darker skinned woman. So I was just like, okay, is this just indicative of what a lot of men do when they have their trophy wives?
Why are you asking that? You already know the answer to that question. Why are you asking? Light, bright, damn near white. That's what you're supposed to go for, right? Particularly in that time before Black Power, right?
I mean, it was definitely indicative of the times. Of course, the woman, unfortunately, would be darker skinned and, you know, lower class. She wielded her, you know, passing as some sort of weird weapon. It was just kind of like, okay, well, I'm special because whenever I want to shop in these white stores, I can easily go. Remember that white author that was there with them?
Yeah.
Like how did that relationship begin? Because it kind of seemed like the relationship honestly was between Irene and the white dude, not necessarily with her husband.
Well, I feel like in those situations, there's always white people who hang out with Black people. There always have been. Especially like if you're a white man back then, you didn't get as much pushback if you did that, if you went to these types of like speakeasies or like parties and nightclubs. And that was really striking how he was married to a woman who was white, and he was fine with her like dancing with all the Black dudes at the party. I was like, well, isn't that interesting, right? But I guess like that's the only way it would have been socially acceptable for a woman like her to be at a party like that. You know, like she's there with her husband. She was there like as a white woman without her husband, who's and she was a wealthy woman or a middle class woman. She would have probably gotten like shunned. It seemed like they were doing pretty well for themselves. Experienced stigma for like occasionally going to the Negro clubs, you know.
Yeah.
That's what white people did sometimes back then. Like, oh yeah, I've been to a Negro club once. I think that they were genuinely friends. Like I think that's always happened. Despite the efforts of the state to keep people of different colors, particularly Black and white, apart, right?
Yeah. I don't think he cared for Claire for some reason.
He did, and he told her. He told Irene, like, I don't mess with that. I don't like that girl. And Irene was trying to, like, say nice things about her, and he was like, I don't remember what words he used, but it was kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why he didn't like her. Is it because he kind of knew that she was truly passing and that her husband was white, or is it, you know, he thought maybe he had a chance and may have flirted with her and she was just like, whatever. I'm just wondering why he wouldn't like her.
Well, not everybody has to like everybody.
No, absolutely. But I'm just trying to figure out how, you know, she could have rubbed him the wrong way. Or is it just one of those things where I'm looking at you and for whatever reason, I just don't like you?
You know what? I think that Irene and that guy are kind of like the same vibe. It was like an opposites attract kind of thing where like Irene and her husband are not the same kind of vibe. Like, her husband was cool, like, talking and mingling with folk. And, like, Irene is, like, more chillax, like... And she was hanging out with a guy who's similar. More of an introvert. And so I think that guy, too, is more of an introvert. Despite, you know, Irene's best intentions, Claire still managed to wiggle her way in. You know, like, you returned my letters! No, I did not. That girl did everything to get rid of that girl.
Yes.
Claire took no hints. One thing I found really striking was how her husband, who called her Nig, right, as the nickname that he gave her, like how he said that, like, she doesn't like being around Black people at all. She can't stand being around them. And I wondered, I think that she mentioned, like, part of the reason why she doesn't have Black people around her is because they might recognize her.
Right.
Know her from her old life, you know, like, oh yeah, I remember you, Claire. Weren't you, you know, so-and-so's sister or so-and-so's daughter?
Yeah, because we're pretty good about being able to tell our own kind, even if you do pass.
Totally.
So I wouldn't have a Black housekeeper either.
Right? We're like, I see your nose.
I would, right.
I actually did that to a white person before. It was kind of like, oh my God, I'm doing that thing. It was like, hey, so where do your people come from? Like, oh, I'm Irish and this and that. It's like, is that all?
Right.
Okay. No Black ancestors at all? Okay. Have you done your ancestry.com? And that hair texture, especially the hair texture, I think I pay a lot of attention. Like, if your hair looks a little coarser, white. I'm like, wig? I doubt it. I think she's probably wearing, like, had dyed her hair blonde. Which a lot of women do and did, right?
Yeah. But I just wonder how her hair looked when it was wet.
Yeah, so I remember talking to my friend Tiffany Gill several years ago about women of color who passed. Oh, we were talking about Rachel Dolezal. That's what it was. And I was teasing her because I was like, I remember there was a black hair conference at Penn. And I remember Tiffany Gill spoke at it. I swear to God, I feel like Rachel Dolezal was there. So I feel like I remember seeing her being like, is she? You know what? It's not my business, right? And like I remember like seeing pictures of Rachel Dolezal's amazing hairstyles. I'm like, Tiffany, I think I've seen that hairstyle on you, and that one too. She's like, yeah, like my friends joke that like she's just essentially copied all my hairstyles. I'm like, yes, she has. She saw you at that hair care conference. She's like, I've got a new muse. All this to say that Tiffany mentioned that when looking at the history of Black hair salons, that when we think about and like Black hair care, you know, that women who were mixed race who were passing probably had to do their own hair. Otherwise, other people would know that they were who they really were.
Unless you just went across town, you know, when it was time to get your roots done.
Well, and how are you going to explain to somebody that you're going halfway across town to get your roots done? I mean, it's a wonder her hair didn't fall out, that blonde hair, you know, and it's probably straightened or maybe she blow dried it. We don't know.
That's why I was wondering if, you know, maybe she just kind of kept it under a wig because men don't be knowing.
It was so interesting how much he hated Black people, but yet he like married a white woman who was like,
yeah, he even said, you know, that she gets darker, you know, each summer or each year. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And
it made me wonder if over time she was doing things like staying in the sun a little bit more, like being a little bit more comfortable with her Blackness. Because like she really took to Irene and really tried to like be in the Black circles that she'd avoided for so long. So it made me think that she had like probably stopped doing what she'd been doing in the past, which was like avoiding the sun, maybe stop using her skin bleaching products. Maybe stopped her K-beauty routine. So what did you think about the ending of the show?
That's the part I still don't understand. I don't know if she just jumped out the window on her own or if Irene pushed her. At first I was like, well, maybe the husband did it. Because at the end I was like, all right, Irene's looking at her husband. It seems like her husband kind of understands something, but at the same time, I'm like, if I were Irene, I'd be like, her husband did it.
The thing is, I feel like, I'm going to be honest, I think she jumped. Because like
That's what
the
I
way
was
that
thinking.
Irene was like, it looked like Irene was trying to protect her from her white
That's
husband.
what I thought.
Right? Like he was coming for her. She's like, I feel like this black solidarity. He was like, no, you will not hurt my friend.
Mm-hmm.
And her friend's like, you're gonna come for me. I'm gonna die, and make it look like you killed me. I think it was plotted because there's a scene, in that scene you see this moment where like Irene takes Claire, takes a step back and like gives this look,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, oh, she's playing at something. That's what I thought. And you see her husband like screaming at her and getting closer, and then like Irene like tries to guard her from her husband.
That's what I thought. But my friend Shauna was saying that Irene pushed her and that she, rewound it a bunch of times. She was like, no, Irene pushed her. And I was like, well, that's
it's all perception, right? It's purposefully ambiguous. Because I remember the book was like that too. It was purposefully ambiguous. Because I feel like Claire had this face. I was like, what are you going to try to do? Irene was talking to the police. She's like, yeah, she jumped and he didn't do anything. Like she knew. I feel like Irene's like, okay, she's gonna make it look like her husband pushed her, but she didn't push her. But you know what? It would be in Irene's interest to get rid of Claire, no matter what.
True, but I would have killed two birds with one stone, and I would have been like, he pushed her.
He pushed her.
Even if I was the one that pushed her out the window, I would have said that.
Rashida, I'm telling
I'm just saying.
you.
I
don't think she pushed her. I don't.
No, I don't think he did either, but I just would have said it.
Remember that Nig comment?
Yeah.
That Nig name you gave your wife? Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Remember how you treated me and all those mean things you said about black people? He pushed her. I saw it with my own eyes. It was him. And the police officers were not handling it in a way that meant that they took it seriously. They're like, yeah, that's what we figured. Okay, we'll keep it moving. It's like, yeah, you're not going to do a real thorough investigation. And it would have been more headache for Irene anyways to come against a white dude and say like, oh yeah, you killed your wife who was passing as white. That would cause her nothing but headache.
Absolutely.
It would have come to nothing. And for what, to have white mobsters at her house attacking her, knowing that she passes occasionally. She didn't need that.
Either way, her husband was supportive and was trying to protect her either way.
Good husband. A+.
Yes, but I think part of him was probably like, this chick, this woman out the window.
Told her not to come over.
Right.
And maybe she doesn't even know herself. She's like, I gestured like this, and now my friend is dead. And like, there's that moment where she's got her arm held out.
Mm-hmm.
The way she had when she was trying to protect / push Claire. She just has her hand like that, like, what just happened? Right?
Yeah.
Better to say she jumped by Claire. Problem solved. Do you think they went to South America after that? Or wherever?
No. I don't think they moved to South America. And honestly, even if they had moved to South America, I really don't think their lives would have necessarily been better. I think it would have been worse.
Really? Pray tell why?
Just because.
Oh yeah, you had some negative experiences in Brazil.
Right? Yeah, but I mean, I just don't think the opportunities would be the same, and that they would miss America, even though they hate the racism. I think that racism would still be in South America. I don't think there was at least I don't know of any like safe community for Black people in South America.
This was a thing that was often reported in the media, or black media outlets like Ebony and like other like Chicago Defender would talk about Black people's experiences in around the world, including in Latin America. And sometimes there was that, like, oh, it's a racial paradise, a rainbow colored, fun in Brazil, in Mexico, and wherever, right? And I remember there was a point, I want to say it was like the late 19th century, early 20th century, which would have been around the Harlem Renaissance, right? In which many Blacks in the United States were like, we're done. We're so tired of the U.S. Where can we go? Let's get some visas to literally move to Brazil and have better lives. And the Brazilian government got wind of it and was like, hell no, we have enough Negroes here. We don't need yours, you know? And like, so there was a lot of pushback from the government of Brazil, which was literally in a campaign, like most of Latin America at the time, to whiten its population. Like, we have enough indigenous people. We have enough black people. We need them to get lighter so that we can be white in like 20, 30, 50 years, you know? So how are we going to do that? Europeans, please come here, you know? The last thing they needed was some like U.S. blacks being like, hey guys.
Well, yeah, so I was thinking most people would probably go to Europe, probably go to France or
Right.
I don't know, London or something where their lives would be a little bit better, at least at that point in time. Because there was, I mean, they loved us for a little while. And then they got tired of us.
Oh, and then again.
We were no longer a
la.
novelty, you know? I would personally, if I were to leave the country in that time, try to go to Europe.
Well, we know what happened in Europe not long after that.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have been a good idea. I mean, like, I remember when I was a postdoc at Penn, I had a mentor who told me, we were talking about, like, where I could see myself in the future. And I was like, I don't know, I'd move anywhere. Working at a job, like, live a nice life. And, you know, sometimes I get tired of U.S.-style racism, and it'd be nice to just take a break from that. She's like, well, racism is everywhere. You know, it's a global white supremacist system. So if you leave the U.S., it'll be like, she made it sound like it'd be just as bad somewhere else. Like, I lived in Spain and Brazil. I'm not saying anti-black racism isn't bad there. In either of those places, it is, right? It's just different, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, where is it different but better? It all depends on what you want, what you don't want, you know? You gotta almost, and it's a very elite thing to get to choose your racism, right? And those were very elite people, right? Like, what racism do I prefer? Do I prefer segregation? Or do I prefer integration but constantly being made to feel like I'm less than? I don't know. Like, do I want to be the black friend? You know, or do I want to like live in the black community? Like in the 1920s. Final thoughts.
Probably how Irene just, you know, as a mother, she was definitely protective of her kids, but it was almost like she didn't want to see the reality of what was, you know, going on, at least with the black men in the community and just in and around America. Like she didn't want her husband talking about who got lynched and stuff like that, where, you know, unfortunately her sons were at that age to have that talk. It's like she just never wanted to have that talk.
I completely agree with you. I was really angry at Irene for not wanting to teach her children about anti-black racism because they could get killed, you know, out of ignorance. And she was not doing a good job as a mother of preparing your children to become adults. Like, mothers are not just supposed to protect their children from outside forces that might do them harm. They're also supposed to prepare them to become adults, to live, and so they can thrive, no matter what like boundaries they're placed in, you know, to help them to live good lives. And she was just, I'm not going to teach them that stuff. Inside of my house, this is like a paradise. It's just like, boo, but it's not. And you're doing more harm to your kid by pretending like, oh, everything's fine. Thank you so much for chatting with me about passing today, Rashida.
Oh, I enjoyed it.
Thanks for getting woke with me today. I hope that you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please like and subscribe. Be sure to share this episode with your friends, your lovers, your enemies, your frenemies, and anybody else who you think might be interested. I hope that you have a wonderful week and take care.